varying degrees of success. Sometimes that's when I get most of my people to drop the class after they've had one day of it and go, oh, I never want to do anything like it. Oh, it's too scary. I can't do that. Mostly when people struggle in this, is it starting by the way? Oh, okay, good. Most of the time when people struggle with this, they don't struggle with the content per se. They tend to do all right. When people struggle in my classes, it's getting in all the assignments. So don't feel like that this is just way over people's heads. Certainly if you're not getting it, by all means, set up the appointment process. I think Andy stopped by, Michael stopped by today. You know, I've got office hours, I'm meeting with Ellie after class. You know, this is the time to meet. So if something's confusing somewhat this week, go ahead and set up something. Friday afternoon may not work too well because of something that came up on my schedule, but the other mornings and afternoons should be good. So don't be bashful about asking for help. I worked really hard over the weekend to make sure I'm prepped up in this whole class, as you can see if you access the files, as well as another one that I'm teaching my evening college class. So that just leaves me with my other two to work on. And I'm trying to get prepped up so that I have more time to meet with you all. We can go one-on-one over these, but I have always had questions up about the analytical thinking slides before, and I've sometimes called on people and I'll get an occasional person to kind of raise their hand and offer something. And it depends on the class. Typically in this class I get pretty good responses because international policy is kind of interesting. So people will venture their theories, their hypotheses. They'll start thinking about variables. This tends to not be too much of a problem. When I do it in American experience, or if I do it like some of the other classes, I think it kind of throws people for a loop. If you've had me before for this class, you've seen this material before. However, every single time I run these slides, the test has been different because I don't want to run the same old thing for every single class. So there is something different for every person doing it. But this is definitely something new. Even if you struggle with it, if you're trying to work with it or so, just give it a shot. If you fill out this worksheet and get it back to me, list it up under assignments, you can get 5 extra points on the first test. Not only that, I wrote up the worksheet. It's like a study guide for the first test too. So you should be really well prepared for this. It's not been a terrible problem in the past, but I want to make sure that people do even better. That you're on top for the skills. So just take, I meant to put on one sheet, my bad. So if you can just take the first 2 and just pass them around, I think there should be enough for everybody. Does that sound okay? So just take 2, move it along.
You said we have to turn this into 5 points. Are we scanning these?
Yeah, so write it dark enough. Now what you might want to do before you start actually writing on it is write down some ideas in your notes, because you might write something down and then if it's wrong you don't want to like scratch it all out and stuff like that. So hang on to it, but write down some of the notes in your notebook or something to write on. If you have a laptop, the last thing I did, I was like really pressed for time, you'll notice I'm like a minute or 2 off, is I was emailing you a copy of this worksheet. So if you've got your laptops up, you can type in your answers and then go, oh, that I didn't mean that at all. And so you can like delete that and type in something different. Now make sure you jot this down for your schedule. Today we're going to do the first part. We're going to try and get through theory, hypotheses, and variables. That's the goal today. If I can possibly get to relationships, I wouldn't mind that, but we may not get to it. It's a 2-parter. Normally I would go over the second part on Wednesday. And then have library day on Friday. But Lindsay Lowry asked me, the library specialist, if she can't do the Friday one, but she said she could do it on, Tuesday, and so, or excuse me, Wednesday. So on Wednesday it's going to be library day, so we'll interrupt. That'll give you some time to catch your breath on this assignment, right? You will not be able to fill out everything today. I think we will get at least through the first page, 1 through 4. I'm going to try to get at least through 6. Don't know if we'll be able to get to 7. I don't want to give you more than you can handle on your first day. But again, save a copy of this worksheet. That's why I want you to scan it on in. Later today, I'll put up an assignment area where you can load up the assignment. It can help me look it over and say, okay, you need to work on this. This is also something where, you know, even if you're kind of bashful about getting something in, I can say, okay, this person needs work on theory. So y'all got that? So the schedule this week, same rooms. Analytical thinking, Monday. Friday, Wednesday, lesson day. Friday, I'm gonna try and get through the test of it, and if we have time, I'm gonna play one or two more of those unsolved history, if we can get through that. So we can look at whether coding the building with something can help with a blast, as well as protecting windows.
We didn't finish the last one.
I know. So we're gonna be playing that. Plus I'll get Andy a chance to catch up. And I put that DVD on reserve, so if you weren't here Friday, or if you want to just watch, or if you want to watch it again, it is on reserve at the library. If your Monroe book has not arrived, it is on reserve in the library. Also, jot this down. I have several other books that are like empirical political analysis by Mannheim, and like 3 other co-authors, Wilnot, Lars, a couple others. But anyway, it's the Mannheim book. And the Nachmius and Nachmius book, a little more complex, but nevertheless, they will have definitions of theory, hypothesis, independent and dependent variables. So I've got about 4 books on reserve that you can use. Does that make sense? So the other ones, though, you won't have pages 1 through 15, but you can just go to the index or the glossary of terms, and that can help you out too. The Mannheim book is what I use in my essential, or I use in my research methods class. I was, man, I wish I had that for, my graduate school would have been a lot easier if I had that particular book. They didn't have one of these for political science. There was like 1 or 2 political science examples. So we had to do a lot of stuff from business and math and science and accounting, which made me a well-rounded person. All right, before I get too long, I'm also going to, in addition to calling out attendance, I see that several people have already claimed cases. So this will give you some ideas of cases. If you need suggestions, by all means, email me. But make sure that you claim it under the forum. Now I know like half the class has done so. Do y'all know how to access the class? On Learning Portal Moodle, International Politics, Fall 2015, so you don't go into a previous year's. Have to look for it. The assignment for today, this extra credit has not been uploaded, but the one for presentation has. And you can also like put a little picture about yourself. So I got to see somebody's cat. I mean, the person's with it, you know, so don't just have a cat, because then I'll think it's a Doctor Who episode or something. My daughter's into Doctor Who, so we watched something with a whole bunch of cat people. That's a very strange show. Very creepy. Alright. So this is what I emailed you today. You can also type it on. Other advantage, like David, you're writing out your stuff. You can then type it up later on the computer. You can. Okay. So in other words, you can write stuff like take notes in class, but then you can type this up. Type up your answers so it'll look neater, and again, use it on the exam. If I get a class full of A's, like everybody gets 90 or above, that would be really awesome. That is my goal. If everybody gets 100, how's this? If everybody gets an A, we'll have class at like, I don't know. We'll find some fancy place off campus. Good goal. All right. I'll have to figure out something with the computer version. All right, so then you can type in your answers. You can be a little longer or so, but make sure you got the course prefix, because if you're taking me for other classes, I'm going to do this with my other classes as well, just to see how well this works out. But make sure you list what the course is. So POLS 2220 International Politics. So I won't confuse you with my conflict class or the European Union class, Europe and America. All good? Questions? All right, let's see. Looks like a lot of people are here. That's a good thing. Get through attendance. Once I get even more familiar with your names, I won't have to shout out your names, but that's a good way to figure out. And you can also see what other people have picked. All right, so Gabrielle, All right, Michael
Here.
and David. Katie. Katie. Stephen. Lexi. By the way, yours is going to be really controversial because the U.S. government actually classifies the Fort Hood shooting as workplace violence. That they claim he is not connected to terrorism, and opponents of the current administration are really strongly rejecting that, and they are arguing that it is terrorism. So it's a big fight back and forth. I would list both sides of the argument. Whatever your conclusions are, just note what both sides of the argument are. When we all saw it, we were like, oh, of course that has to be terrorism or something like that. And it is somewhat a complicated case. James, you got Charlton. James really wanted it because he not only posted it up on the board, but he also emailed me. So yes, definitely. And again, I would include both arguments because there are some people who go, no, this isn't terrorism. He was just off his meds. So you've got to make that argument. This is applicable for several. Alice? Is it in the back? I hadn't done this in a long time. I was so frantically trying to type up and say you got approved. I didn't include my signatory, even though I've done it for everyone else. So don't think I was sliding you. I just forgot to type up the John A. Tures rules. The same thing you'll have with the Fort Hood shooting. The Oklahoma beheading case. Was that a food processing plant?
Yeah, they said it was workplace violence, but he, like, on his social media, he was like a known.
Yeah. What I would do is I would get it back and forth, and nothing against Andrew Breitbart because I do kind of the same stuff Breitbart does, but that wouldn't be considered a source. You might want to look at what you can report it, but just see if others have picked that up.
I was just sending you in the, just to show you, like, okay,
Right.
okay.
Just saying, I mean, it's like, for example, I used to write for a site called Like the Do, and it was really nice, but I can't really cite it because not everyone sees it as a conventional publication.
Right.
Which one?
The Andrew Bright, it's an opinion column.
Yeah, it's like a blog. So I mean, if you find something that's like a source, and it may not be published, but they raise a couple good points, and published sources pick up on it. Those the initial information or saying, hey, it's been circulated around or something, they're like good bird dogs. Not all bird dogs do a good job. You'll be like, oh, I brought down that. It's gonna get the bird that I brought down. It's like a piece of wood or something. It's like a stick. But most bird dogs are pretty good. So sometimes blogs are like good bird dogs or so for getting research. Okay, and Sydney. If I could see afterwards, I just want to know who the person was that we talked to who's transferred from Fort Hays State, because the two psychology professors I talked to didn't know that she was a major, so she needs to fill out a form. So if you give me her name after class,
Okay.
I can get that over to them. Lavelle? Alice? Oh, yeah. Mimi? Yeah, that's, is it workplace violence or is it terrorism? So for all of you who've got these, look at, definitely look at both sides if it's in dispute. Make sure we got both sides covered on that. Betsy back? I think Betsy's out. And Jens? Again, Newtown shooting, that is like the hardest case to make for terrorism, but keep this in mind for a couple of you. I think one person said they want to do Columbine, they just haven't covered it. Some of these may not be terrorism, but they are lone wolf violence cases. Maybe we can learn something about them, or even sometimes you learn about what something is when you figure out what something isn't, if that makes sense. I mean, is there an actual argument that he would be? So in that sense, I would, this is why I wrote on the forum post, I would accept. Right. Sometimes that's why over in the Middle East they behead somebody really fast and stuff, and there are advantages to that, but disadvantages in terms of discovery. Like, hey, we took care of that terrorist. Oh, wait, were they part of a network? Too late.
And they're conflicting information about the people.
Yeah. She was looking at a case in the UAE. Is that right? Okay. That was around the time they'd actually offered for me to go in over and teach over the summer, and I was like, oh, really? Didn't stop me from going to Turkey, but Turkey's different. Brecken. Andy? Yep. There you go. Okay. Claim that case if you want it. and he's thinking about doing the Olympic Park bombing and other cases that Eric Rudolph did. And yeah, we actually had the special agent in charge from the FBI was one of my guest speakers over in Dixon Assembly Room. We talked about sort of his motives, why he was trying to do that.
I have a question.
Yes.
I just posted it on the forum, so do I need?
Oh, you did? Okay. Were you looking at another one, Andy?
No, I'll change it.
Okay, well, what do you work out before the end of class and then decide who's going to be what? And let's see. Okay, I'll see if Rick is here. And then Carly's got Aurora Building. Again, just make sure that that's what, that's what it is. If that makes sense. All right, let's get on to subject matter. Now, you'll notice I did not insist that you use a political science example. It definitely, I think it would help, but it is not required. I mean, you'll find yourself coming up with theories about just about anything. I know it sounds strange. Like, for example, when my daughter was born, and again when my son was born, I mean, I was pretty much, I was like almost like using these analytical techniques to try and figure out what was going on. Like which strategies work for raising a kid or not, Can I get them to eat better if I get them to try a bunch of different foods, or just stick with the one and use it repeatedly, just so they get something in them? Would it help if I ate the baby food first to let them know it's okay? Stay away from the green and the orange stuff was okay. Yellow was tolerable. Stuff that was whitish was But I tried theories about everything, just helping them crawl, what would work and stuff like that. It's kind of like, it was like fun, but I'm still kind of keeping with my discipline in my own mind. And my wife bought and read just about, or she hit almost every used bookstore, and we had a stack of baby books and stuff, and she would analyze what other people had published, and I was just relying on observation. It's like, could I figure out a strategy? Or I talked to other profs who had kids, staff members and stuff, to get some ideas, and I tried one strategy versus another. So in your everyday lives, certainly whatever your extracurriculars are, especially sports. Sports is like one of the best places for the use of analytical thinking. And that's the direction of the sport, where it's going to. So whatever you decide to do for your theory, you can do. It's not required for political science. I just thought it might help if it was. And your future research project might help. How many of y'all heard this phrase before about the catch a fish? You give it to somebody and they eat for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, then you've taught them a skill that they can use the rest of their life. That's what we're trying to do in our political science classes, Dr. Tracy Lightcap and I. We're trying to not feed you full of just a list of facts for you to memorize. We're trying to teach you a process by which you evaluate, because who knows what will happen in politics years from now. We're trying to give you stuff that is constant. From the dawn of time, please don't use that in paper, to the present and to the future. That's what our goal is to get you that skill. The theories I'm going to give you aren't just theories that somebody just randomly came up with. These are ones that people have adopted since a couple hundred BC onto the present. I'm trying to give you ideas. And not only that, a lot of times your theory about international politics can be used in something else within political science, or even in whatever else you might wind up majoring in. Future areas of studies have picked up from what happened. And political science is interdisciplinary. We borrow from a lot of different fields. So you're going to learn a lot of different theories about a lot of different majors on campus. I bet you didn't think that was going to happen. So, one of the side benefits, you're being taught how to fish. I'm not just going to make you memorize all the U.S. presidents. I memorized all the U.S. presidents. It was kind of neat. I think they were on a placemat of mine. It helps me at trivia and on Thursday night at 7:30. Mighty Joe's Pizza. It helps there. But very little else do I have to know off the top of my head. The 12th President of the United States. Anybody know it?
Zachary Taylor.
Huh, how would you know? Oh, that's it. You've had this class before. My son is named Zachary Taylor Tures. So he knows the 12th president better than anybody else. You know, memorizing states and state capitals. We went out after we saw American Ultra on Friday. Somebody pulled up a good website that showed how badly people messed up their geography tests about U.S. geography. There were people in the state of Illinois who didn't know where Illinois was. You'd think that would have come up. But nevertheless, Chicago is a state unto itself. So we're not necessarily about memorizing the facts and figures. It's good to know what the theories are, but don't just know what they are. Know how to apply them. Know how to figure out, okay, what is the theory actually saying, and how else can I use this in daily life? There was for example, long before there was these analytical people like Tony La Russa and Bill Belichick, there was a guy, his name was Hayden Fry, and he built up University of Arizona into a good power football program, and then he went to Iowa, which was a doormat, and he made Iowa very relevant in a short period of time. He had him in the Rose Bowl. He was a psychology major and a stats geek, and he would apply the lessons he learned in psychology to defeating opponents. So he set up a lot of things before the game, not only how to motivate his players, but how to demotivate his opponents. One of the things he was best known for was painting opposing locker rooms pink, to which a lot of people said, he's a sexist! But that's not why he was doing it. He wasn't saying anything bad about femininity. It's just that pink it's one of those colors. It's that's designed to put people at ease, not get them all fired up and stuff. So he wouldn't paint stuff in stuff in his school colors. You know, he painted locker rooms a certain way to motivate his team to fire them on that. There was a big discussion about grading or so in my wife's class when we were in open house. Somebody's like, oh, please don't use red pens. Red's terrible. Red's a bad color and stuff. And I said, well, why do they have so many red Ferraris? Would green or yellow not be? Nick is like, that would be a crime to paint a Ferrari yellow. No, I'm just kidding, for all this yellow shit. So anyway. What you're supposed to be doing is developing the analytical skills. We're constructing theories. Deriving hypotheses. Most of you are like, hey, I'll take any Ferrari. I don't care what the color is. You're constructing theories, deriving hypotheses, and figuring out how to test arguments. Not just because I said so, or because so-and-so has a fancy job title. That we should say, yeah, we'll go along with that. You've got to think, how can we construct a simple test? We start simple. Most people think science is about making it as complex and hard to understand as possible. It doesn't work that way. My business working in DC, when I was doing defense contract, if they didn't understand, I learned something in Washington, DC. If somebody doesn't understand what you're doing, they won't give you millions of dollars. They won't even give you tens of thousands of dollars. You've got to be able to explain what you're doing. Start simple with what you're working on. Then as the client, they understand what the simple model is, then you can get a little fancier and build onto it till whatever level of complexity they prefer. But you always should start simple. You ever hear that KISS? Keep it simple. Yeah, I can't say it. You coach your students stupid. Okay, but you get the idea. We're going to start out pretty simple. I would recommend a bivariate model. That means two variables. Something kind of simple, kind of straightforward. If you're taking your notes, it doesn't have to be political science. You may think of a political science one later to get the points for the exam. You got it. I would say turn it in. When's our first exam? What's the actual date? It's like September.
16th.
Okay. All right, so I would have it in by September 14th, let's say that way. So that way I can check over to make sure you're understanding the terms. Get it in earlier than that, the extra credit. This worksheet I hand out today. In fact, I would recommend getting it to, the earlier you get to me, the better I can check it off, the better I can take a look at it. Hey, if you get it done in today, that's a good start. Aim to get it in today.
Are we gonna finish this?
Oh, good point. Get it done by Friday next week. That'll give us enough time.
are we gonna have access to this or not?
Oh yeah, I emailed it to you.
No,
But I will,
the PowerPoint.
oh, the PowerPoint, it's already up.
Okay.
After class, I'll pull it up and I'll show you where it can be found. Good point. By the end of this week, have it done. But have most of it ready so that in Friday class, you can knock it out. Turn it in that afternoon. I'll look at them over Labor Day weekend. Not during the Georgia game, but thereafter or so. And I'll give you some suggestions about it. You never know, it might be a good senior seminar project. Anybody ever heard the term science? Yes. What does science mean? When you boil it on down, science means knowledge. So political science is therefore, what is it, Kato? Yeah, knowledge of all things. So if you ever have some presidential candidate go, oh, I'm against all this science, you can take them at their word. I hate science. Okay. Everybody is entitled to an opinion. But that's all science means. Knowledge. Or that's the technical term is derived from. So, like, what? But I'm a religious person. You ever hear like Christian scientists? Yeah. You can, don't buy into that. See, I like the book Angels and Demons, and the movie was kind of entertaining, but I can't stand that they made it sound like science and religion were mutually exclusive. You'll find a fair number of religious people with science degrees. You almost have to try and explain what's going on. And yes, it was my son who, y'all ever do this at your church, where there's like a box, and kids bring something, it's put in a box, and then the pastor has to do a sermon about it. And I didn't check what my son was doing, so he put his favorite dinosaur in there. Right in the middle of the cell. Luckily, our youth minister handled it very deftly.
What do you say?
I just remember he handled it very deftly. I think he kind of took it head on. But in a way that wouldn't offend some of the older members, let's say. But I was like, he goes, oh look, a dinosaur, and then I was like, I'm thinking mentally in my list, check what your son is putting in the box. I noticed he didn't get to, even though there'd be like 10 kids out there, he didn't get the box for a couple of months. I tried to get the box this time, man. I know what. It's a dinosaur. We're trying to wonder what the next thing is. A theory is nothing more than a connection between variables. Don't just rely on this for the slide sheet, write it down, because you'll remember it better. Every time we have some music at trivia that we can't remember, and it's a real easy one, I always write it down so I can get it next time. Theory, that's all it is, a connection between variables. So you gotta have at least two factors. What is the relationship between them? There could be a relationship or could be no relationship. But that's all a theory is. I know people are trying to make it more complicated for you, but when you boil it on down, that's what you get. Now, of course, the sciences that will have, political science, they have a lot in common with the physical sciences. Anybody here biology major, chemistry major? Good. Physics? Geology? Okay. So we're from biology, did you say?
Biology.
Very good. Yeah, my sister-in-law teaches physics over at Columbus State University, and we're always talking shop. And one time we were doing this at my daughter's party. We had a science party for her where we fired off potato guns, and we made dry ice soap bubbles and stuff. My brother-in-law made a fire tornado. Didn't work as well as I would have thought, but we still got that thing cranked up about that time. By the way, one of the coolest things you can do if you ever have kids is have a science party. Find a good science. Check YouTube videos before. But nevertheless, a lot of times we're talking to people are like, what do you have in common? You teach political, whatever, politics or so, and you say, no. We have the same kinds of terms. A theory, a hypothesis, a law, positive and negative relationships, independent, dependent variables, all of that is borrowed from the hard sciences. Don't forget, political science is interdisciplinary. We borrow from everybody. Because politics deals with everybody. We're one of the only majors where you can't escape politics. Had a gal, African-American woman who's a member of the state house in Alabama. She put it best. She said, there are no sidelines in America. You gotta take one side of it, you gotta be somewhere about politics. There's no sidelines, watch football, they run out of bounds, you can't hit them, right? Or it'll be a flag. Right, there's no sidelines. Every field on campus that anyone studies is somehow going to be regulated by politics or debated, including biology. So whenever you come up with your theory about, you can have one that kind of mixes biology and political science, or a good one in biology that might be affected by political science. There are a few differences. It's good to know. That's why they didn't put us in the science building. Plus I hear they're building a swanky new science building. I'm almost wondering, it looks really nice. I've seen those. I might try and see if they have like a back area for us. I would like to be part of that building.
They're rebuilding this one, right? Just sounds good.
They're gonna renovate that.
It's on Monday.
Oh my gosh, yeah, take a look at the art conceptions of what that thing's gonna look like. And before you go, yeah, that's the artist conception. I remember seeing the artist conception of this library and the bridge kind of thing, and that's what we got. They both looked really good.
When did we get the blues?
They're around the same time. They were built around pretty close to the same time as each other. I was pretty impressed. My favorite part was there's gonna be a shower in there. But anyway, there are a couple differences. Greater control over the subject matter. The hard sciences, they have a lot more control over the subject matter. They can do stuff in their experiments that we can't in political science. Like, y'all ever hear about how the Nazis, when they had death camps like in Auschwitz, they had this guy named the Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele. Y'all ever hear of this guy? He had some sicko experiments he would do on people. The unluckiest people who ever went to Auschwitz were twins. He loved experimenting on twins. It was like something out of the Maze Runner or something, only worse. My daughter started reading the Scorch Trials. It comes out September 12th. No, I don't get it. Yeah, all these wicked experiments. But it wouldn't surprise me if James Dasher didn't base some of them on some of the games that Nazis would play with them. Did you know what they did to capture U.S. flyers? I met one who, luckily, he evaded capture from his B-17 that was shot down. Others in his B-17 that was shot down, that parachuted to live, but they were captured, were not so fortunate. They wanted to check out diving suits. Or not so much diving suits, but suits for pilots for when their planes went down in the English Channel or in the North Sea after bombing the British. They wanted to see if they could build a suit that you could survive the extreme cold temperatures. So a lot of US and British pilots, and some of the Free French and a few of the Polish folks, they'd get the flyers and they would test them. They'd get you in a suit, stick you in the North Sea, see how long you lived. And then they would write up the results. They were trying to see how long you lived before you froze to death. Not cool. There's even a big debate about whether we should use that material because, let me tell you, people crash flying back from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, trying to get back to the state of Washington or so. Could we use that information? After all, they died. You want the information to help somebody, right? On the other hand, the way they got it would encourage people to become like that Maze Runner book. Maybe think, what if we did this with people convicted of murder? Yeah, you don't want to be, you don't want to start on that gateway drug. That makes sense. Whereas for the social sciences, we're testing stuff about human beings generally. A little harder to test. Got some morality issues. Even if we were to do a survey about the political attitudes of Troup County, which we've done in the past, we had to get permission from the IRB, Institutional Review Board. People had to look, just to ask them, are you a Democrat, Republican, or independent? Just, the slightest test you do on humans. Y'all ought to check these out. Y'all want to see a good YouTube video over Labor Day weekend? Write this down. Milgram experiments. They did those after World War II. I think our friends in the psychology department tried those out. Milgram experiments. They did one Stanford experiment, prisoners and guards. You ever hear about that? Made it into a movie.
Oh, yeah.
Where they made half the class guards and the other half prisoners. And, oh, Stanford, elite students. Oh, they won't get in any trouble. By the end, you got like the guards are beating the crap out of the prisoners. And the prisoners were told to resist, and so they had to cancel the experiment partway through. Yeah, they got a lot of rules about testing human beings. Not only that, the hard sciences, they look for scientific laws. Good to know this. Scientific laws, you will rarely ever find them. Although there is one, as close as we have to a scientific law, and we're going to look at it Monday, today, and Friday. What always occurs, or never occurs. That's what a scientific law is. Can y'all think of a scientific law? Okay, I put one up there, but that's a good start. What did I put up there, Ali? Law of gravity. Y'all know what law of gravity means? Go ahead. Anybody? Do I need to get our biology major? Alright. I take out my, there you go. Stephen is already doing his experimental test. I get this, something's gonna happen if I let go, right? It's gonna drop. It's gonna drop at a certain rate, right? It's gonna drop at
3 minutes.
something about 9.8, right?
Yeah, negative 9.8.
9.8 meters per second. So if I drop it, okay. They had this chain email going around back when we were more naive about the email, where they had some atheist professor or so talking about a piece of chalk and then he let go and it didn't fall all the way down and he ran screaming out of the room and everyone converted to Christianity or so. It happened at USC. And it's been debunked because we were all naive about the email. So I didn't have chalk, so I just did keys. But I'm a Christian, so it didn't work. I'm being taken. So anyway, yeah. Something that always happens, right? It's gonna happen. Any other laws you ever heard about? Scientific one? Is it just the law of gravity?
Conservation.
Which one? Go ahead.
Force is going to have equal opposite force.
Oh, okay. Newton's laws of physics, right? Action, every action involves an equal and opposite reaction unless it's the A-bomb. So, I mean, it was a good scientific law for a long period. Conservation of
Matter.
matter cannot be created or destroyed. What was it? Y'all ever see the Keanu Reeves, Jennifer Connelly movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still? Where he's telling us, like, nobody died, our particles just become something different. You just become dust. You haven't died, you're just taking on a different form. And you won't do as well in fantasy book. So, what else? Boyle's law of gases. We look at things that always happen or never happen. That's in the hard sciences. The standard for proof is so high, we don't have this. Plus, humans I mean, you can find patterns, but to find something that everyone will do or never do, other than our scientific biological functions, correct? So we often have to look for, when it comes to human behavior, which is what we're interested in, our political behavior, we have to look at generalizations. What often happens, never happens, right? Michael's probably thinking, California always votes Democrat. Well, except when Ronald Reagan was in office. And, in fact, back then, 70s and 80s, California was a Republican state. It voted Republican every year. It rarely ever voted Democrat. So, hard to find cases. Vermont, New England used to be the most Republican place in the United States. I have a publication on that subject. It always blows people away. In fact, you had to wash your mouth out with soap up in New England if you said the word Democrat. That happens in a book I was reading to kids. Seriously, like you could curse more than say Democrat. Now, we can't even think of any Republicans who get elected up there. Things change. So, we look for generalizations. Make sure you couch your terms often, usually, rarely. If you do find a scientific law, that is super impressive. Don't tell anyone. Just go off to Madison Avenue or Wall Street and make a lot of money, because you have what's known as a piece of the truth. So never stop looking, but understand that most of what we'll find in our life will be generalizations. You understand that? Really hard to find a scientific law. Always look, but don't feel bad if you come up short. It's like somebody going, man, I only hit, in baseball, I only hit 400. Urgh. Only 4 out of 10 times can I get a hit. That's pretty good. But never stop trying to get hit every single time. Any baseball players? Okay, good. Same thing. Always trying to get more, right? But don't beat yourself up if you're hitting 400 or 300. Then you get that 200 Mendoza line that you got to work. So what we're going to look at is one of the, it's been debated. Sometimes it's called the first law of international relations. Is there a connection between regime type, that means your government type, and the presence of conflict in the world countries? It's known as the democratic peace. P-E-A-C-E. Connection between variables, right? What are the variables? Good, Gabrielle. What are the variables?
The regime and the,
Or your type of regime.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and the world's country.
What would be the other variable? Because most countries have a go. Conflict. Okay. The presence or absence of conflict. Those would be your two variables that you'll look at. Right? Make sense? Okay, good. So what type of government a country has and whether it gets involved in conflict or not. 2 factors. Make sense? Somebody give me one that you're thinking about. Anybody got one? Good theory? Need a little time to think about it? Your connection between variables? Nobody? No brave souls? You want to wait just a little bit? All right. Thinking back in terms of science. Does the type of government you have always and in every case influence whether you have conflict or not? Like it's a scientific law, every single time. Like an undemocratic country will always go to war, in every single case, 100%. At 9.8 per meter squared, the rocket shell will win. Will it never influence the presence of international? Like, it's the total most random thing ever. Oh, yeah. So what we look at is we would start to say, all right, we'll see if it generally, on average, do you have a certain type of government that is more likely to lead to war or more likely to lead to peace? On average. What do y'all think it would be? A democratic or an undemocratic country? What do you think, Alice?
An undemocratic country.
The which one?
An undemocratic country.
What do you think an undemocratic country is going to do?
The world.
Go to war? Okay. That's one of the arguments, that if you're an undemocratic country, you're probably more likely to go to war. If you're a democratic country, probably more likely to go to peace. We don't know that yet. That's just what the proposition is. That's what the theory is. Yeah. Keep this in mind. This is going to be one of those hard to wrap your mind around this thing. Okay, so get your hats on. Theories are supposed to be vague and abstract. This is why people don't, this is where one of the big turnoffs we have in science. That theory is so vague. Can't test that. Kind of a vague proposition. When we look at realism, we'll say that the decisions countries make are based on power calculations. That's kind of vague, right? What the heck is that? They are supposed to be vague. They're supposed to be abstract. James got a hand up. Go ahead.
Can you define abstract theory?
Abstract. Really general, can apply to a lot of different situations, which is why we have it. A good theory is vague. A country's foreign policy decision and power calculations. It can apply to a lot of forms of power. Power can be measured many different ways, right? There are a lot of things countries can do. They're even making up some new ones as we go along, right? Don't worry, don't worry. It'll be clear in just a little bit. I'll explain the matrix. Wait, that 90's not right. What we want is we want a situation that is going to be pretty flexible. I had a dissertation professor from Florida State, or he was the head of my dissertation committee. He said, a good theory is like a Jeep. You can take it a lot of different places. And y'all are like, I wish I was out mudding right now. You're mudding, you can drive up in the mountains. If you wash it pretty well afterwards, you can take it out and people will say, cool, that person drives a Jeep. Right? Okay, well maybe not take it to the opera or so, unless you want to park around the back there with your bike options. Does that make sense? It's pretty flexible. It can apply to all. A good theory is defined not whether it is true and provable, because that's really hard to do, but is it interesting? Remember that. How can you get somebody's attention? Given that theories are so vague that they can't be tested, you want to get somebody's interest in what you're doing. I know that's not what you've been thinking about all along. We're supposed to like put liquids into beakers and put a Bunsen burner on them and set something, you know. How many of y'all watch Mythbusters or had ever seen an episode? That is interesting, is it not? That's why everybody watches it, because they have a lot of interesting things. They do like movie myths. Like they wanted to see, like there was some episode where a guy had a grenade, he didn't know what to do with it. It's like a crowded house, so he tossed it in a fridge and locked the fridge. So they tested to see whether that would really work. Isn't that interesting? Huh?
Did it work?
Well, depends on what you mean by work. They he chucked the grenade in the fridge, slammed the door. It was a TV show called Monk. And then there was an explosion inside, but nobody died. I mean, obviously the cheese will probably not be good. You might have to throw it out or so. Now, anybody ever seen the episode? Do y'all remember what happened when they put the grenade on in and closed the fridge? Yeah, I mean, there was shrapnel everywhere. So, in fact, that was the worst thing that the person could have done. Because, I mean, the grenade would have shattered, pieces of the grenade would have flown off. In this case, it became almost like a giant grenade. It just, all it meant was bigger pieces, and they had like their dummies set up all around them, and some of these could have decapitated or cut in half and stuff like that. So, I don't know when you would ever need a grenade or have one in your hand that you have to dispose of, but I wouldn't chuck one in a fridge.
So the new Indiana Jones is not accurate.
Oh, they tested that one, a different one. The one where he jumped inside the fridge
Yeah.
to escape the nuclear blast.
That worked.
I don't think it did so well. Then again, they made stuff in the 50s to last.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember that one going so well. But see, Mythbusters was interesting because we've wondered some of these questions, right? You ever watch something like I was watching American Ultra, which is kind of like Scott Pilgrim meets the Bourne Identity? And I kept thinking like, I really wonder what would happen if somebody tried to do one of those stunts in real life. Make sense? It's often one of the best things you can say in science. I wonder. Can you get people interested in what you're doing? So have a pretty good topic. Have a pretty good connection between variables that people would care about. When democratic peace was, I think somebody mentioned it, believe it or not, in a science journal. It was an industry journal too, where they mentioned this as an idea. They did some studies. Then another group discovered it in the 70s, but they formalized the measures a little better. The democratic peace proposition has been mentioned by every United States president after 1976. It is one of the only things, other than love God and America and apple pie, that you'll find in the State of the Union address from a president. Every one of them. Carter, Reagan, Bush, both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, they've all mentioned it in their State of the Union address. It has become a keystone, or a key cornerstone of American foreign policy. That was interesting to somebody. We can apply it to a lot of different types of government. We can apply it to many different forms of conflict. We might even, some people have looked to see if it applies to domestic politics. In other words, do democratic countries, are they more likely or less likely to have a civil war? Does that make sense? You can build on it. Remember, you can even draw this or download an image from Yahoo that has an image of a Jeep so you can remember this. Here is it interesting. Okay, so I have an interesting theory for you. Now, a hypothesis is not an educated guess. Please write that down. I'm going to have a talk with my son's science teacher because they made him say hypothesis is an educated guess. An educated guess is an oxymoron, folks. Anybody know what an oxymoron is? Yeah, it's a what? It's what?
It's like you got it. I don't know, it's like they contradict each other.
Yeah, it's like contradiction in terms or self-contradiction, right? Like jumbo shrimp, and those things are pretty small. And if you had a jumbo shrimp, it should be like the size of this room. Pretty sweet. But pretty cool on low country board. It's not an educated guess, because guesses, educated guesses. Don't know why they keep teaching it. Somebody came up with the idea and they just beat it in people's minds, and I'm trying to beat it out of them. No. All they are is, it is a, underline this, put it up in red, whatever you need to do. A hypothesis is more specific, testable version of the theory. So now Carly's like, okay, that theory was way too abstract for me. But a hypothesis is going to be concrete, specific, something that we can actually put to the test. Last year in this class, we looked at whether there is parity in the NFL. You know what parity is? It's like kind of everybody's around the same, like they all have even records. No one team is significantly better than the other. Well, we tested that. Well, first off, they got everybody interested. If people didn't like football, I think we're interested. That is kind of vague, so what we had to do is figure out, well, what is parity? So we looked at win-loss record and winning percentage. We looked at what the average was. It's around 50%. And then we tried to see how many, whether a lot of teams were like 9-7, 7-9, they're all clumped together, or whether we have some teams that are like, they win almost all their games, 13-3, with a lot of crappy teams, like the Chicago Bears, 3-13. Green Bay. I like that 13-3, 3-13.
Lions.
Yeah, although they got some injuries. Lions would be like, what, 8-8?
You could do that for the major leagues. They have different payrolls by 150 million and still have records that are close to 2 games apart.
Yep.
Yeah, and also like some of the highest paid teams in the Bush record.
Now here's something that's really cool I'd like to test. Baseball does not have a salary cap. So like the Yankees can, their payroll will be more than like 6 or 7 teams. And they don't have a salary cap. Is there more parity in the NFL, which does have a salary cap, or the NBA, right? Because the Cavaliers, they have to balance the budget, right? Or do you agree? Do you agree or disagree? I said NBA has a salary cap, so you have to balance the books, right? You can't just go out and sign every single player. Unless you say, hey, you want to play for like $100,000?
Yeah, I gave a speech about that in my old school.
Oh, you did?
I said that the salary cap doesn't create more parity, at least in baseball at least.
But we could test that, right?
Yeah.
So parity is a very nebulous term. What does that really mean? It can mean a lot of things. We just boil it down to wins and losses. Just like when somebody says, oh, this is a good quarterback. Well, how do you define it? There are many ways to define a good one, right? Number of yards passing, number of touchdowns, number of wins, number of playoff wins, number of Super Bowl wins, right? They're like an infinite number of any sport. Volleyball, don't y'all have some statistics? Digs and kills.
Kill percentage, pass percentage.
Yeah, so not just like how many spikes you have, because, you know, you could have a couple key spikes, but then some of them you send out to the restroom, you know, or something like that, they smash through the door a little further back, right? So we all have ways. That's why sports is really good. Sports is always trying to quantify. You know, it's a game based on numbers. So hypotheses are specific testable versions of theories. We go beyond, oh, I think so-and-so is the greatest quarterback ever, to now we have to quantify. What do you mean by the greatest? We have to agree upon some statistics. Oh, yeah. And then somebody will argue that some of the greatest cheated. The same way we look at, okay, well, what is a democracy? What is a non-democracy? Right? We'd have to have some rules on that. Is it having elections? Saddam Hussein in Iraq used to have elections. You know, so it's probably got to be more than that, right? How do we figure out whether some elections are free or not? And not only that, if you win the election, do you actually get to take office? Or do they just give you a ceremonial position where you figure out which pickle you'll get for the Christmas party? Got to be able to make some meaningful decisions, right? Jimmy Carter said we're not in a democracy anymore. That was pretty controversial. What do you mean by that? So when the Selma March came through LaGrange, that was one of the questions people asked me on the panel, was, do you think America is a democratic country? They didn't define it on whether we have elections or so, but whether people with lots of money have more political influence than those who do not. Because it's supposed to be like one person, one vote. I actually did research on that subject, and I told them about it. In 2004, I wrote a column about this. In the 2004 election, there were 23 people who spent more than $1 million of their own money running for office. 23 candidates across the country. Only one of them won. I'm guessing that if you go 1 for 23, you're probably going to want to dust off a spot on the bench, right? And the one who won defeated another person who spent $1 million. So it was like a race of 2 million or so. One of them had to win, and one had to lose. So 1 for 23, which is what Dave Winfield batted for the Yankees at the 1981 World Series, which is why the Yankees lost. He was their big star, and he went into the series, and it was a horrible time. I think he got lifted for the budget. Right? 1 for 23. So I'm not saying that money doesn't matter in politics. I'm just saying that in some cases it's overrated. When it comes down to it, it's still one person, one vote. People can find really interesting ways of losing millions of dollars. It's not just so-and-so made $100 million and they lost it all over their career. It's like, oh, you should see political spending sometimes. People find good ways to waste political spending that won't increase their vote share. Right? But nobody would have known that. Everyone just assumed it was the case. Do you understand that? Oh, where are we at? Okay, mine says I got 2 minutes. Is it different for y'all?
It's 11:51.
All right, well then I'll let you go. But where are we going to meet on Wednesday?
I don't know.
Right here. We're going to do library research. But start filling out what your hypothesis and your theories are. Start looking ahead to think about what variables you might include in those. If you got theories and hypotheses, you have to have variables. We'll figure out which is which. Sure. We can have you put it on. Oh, awesome. Okay, I mean, I can look it on over. We'll eventually load it up like everybody. Let me hit you an email.
I'll go eat with you.
So that's like a hard copy. So turn that.
I'll mark it up. No problem. What's up, Cindy? Oh yeah, what is the person's name? From Fort Hays State. First name is Murray?
Murray.
Oh, Murray. Last name?
Fravy.